The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos. Ambassador Vector of the Zentari slammed 3 of his appendages against the obsidian table, his bioluminescent markings flashing crimson with alarm. "The motion stands," he declared, his translator box crackling. "Humanity is hereby banned from all council space. Effective immediately." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Olithian delegate's crystalline form pulsed with satisfaction. The Chromath representative clicked his mandibles in approval. After 3 cycles of debate, the council had finally reached consensus. Humanity was too dangerous, too unpredictable, too infectious. It had started innocently enough. 20 years ago, the council had welcomed humanity with cautious optimism. Earth's representatives had seemed primitive but harmless, eager to learn, desperate to prove themselves worthy of the galactic community. The council had granted them limited trade rights, restricted travel permissions, and a single outpost on the neutral moon of Tarsus 7. That should have been the end of it. But then the Zentari Mining Consortium on Helios 9 reported something strange. Their efficiency had increased by 40%. When investigators arrived, they found the Zentari workers wearing something called motivational posters in their tunnels. Crude images with phrases like "dig deep or die trying" and "no pain, no gain." The workers had learned these from a human engineer named Rodriguez, who'd been contracted for a single rotation. Rodriguez was long gone, but his influence remained. The council dismissed it as an isolated incident. They were wrong. Within a cycle, Chromath warriors were performing something called push-ups before battle. Olithian scientists were consuming a dangerous stimulant called coffee during their research sessions. The plague-like spread of human concepts accelerated beyond anyone's comprehension. Then came the Festival of Stars on Zentara Prime, the most sacred ceremony in council space. For 10,000 years, the festival had been a solemn meditation on cosmic harmony. But this year, a Zentari youth had introduced something he'd learned from human cultural databases: music. Not the traditional harmonic resonances of their people, but something with rhythm, with beat, with what humans called bass drop. Within hours, thousands of Zentari were moving in ways their species had never moved before. They called it dancing. The conservative elders called it cultural contamination. The council launched an investigation. What they discovered horrified them. Humanity hadn't conquered through military might or technological supremacy. They had done something far more insidious. They had shared their culture, their ideas, their relentless optimism and stubborn refusal to accept limitations. On Chromath, human military instructors had taught soldiers about esprit de corps and leave no one behind. Chromath casualties dropped by 70%, but more disturbing, Chromath warriors began questioning orders they considered unjust. The rigid hierarchy that had maintained their civilization for millennia was cracking. On Olithan research stations, human scientists had introduced concepts like brainstorming and thinking outside the box. The Olithian, who had spent centuries perfecting incremental improvements to existing technology, suddenly experienced a renaissance of innovation. 3 breakthrough discoveries in 2 years. It was unprecedented. It was terrifying. But the final straw came from the most unexpected source. The Ynnari were the council's accountants, their bureaucrats, their living calculators. For 50,000 years, they had maintained galactic commerce with absolute precision and zero creativity. Their entire existence revolved around rules, regulations, and the sanctity of procedure. Then a Ynnari clerk named Tixlin attended a human seminar on something called entrepreneurship. 6 months later, Tixlin had created the first Ynnari startup company. He called it TixCorp, and somehow convinced 12 other Ynnari to join him in developing faster-than-light communication that bypassed traditional council channels. When the council moved to shut him down, Tixlin did something no Ynnari had ever done. He refused. "Where in the regulations," he asked calmly, "does it say I cannot innovate?" The council had no answer. The regulations, written over millennia, had never anticipated this scenario. They had never needed to ban innovation because no species had ever thought to ask the question. That's when Ambassador Vector understood the true threat. Humanity didn't conquer with weapons. They conquered with questions, with dreams, with the dangerous notion that the universe wasn't fixed, that civilization wasn't finished, that there was always room for improvement. So the council acted. They banned humans from council space, revoked all trade agreements, and severed diplomatic ties. They congratulated themselves on containing the threat before it was too late. They were fools. As Vector reviewed the enforcement protocols 3 days after the ban, his aide brought him a report. A shipping manifest showing unauthorized cultural data files spreading through the quantum network. Human movies. Human books. Human music. 1 million small packets of information, replicated across 1,000 worlds. The ban had been implemented too slowly. On Zantara, a group was forming to protest the decision. They called themselves the Free Thinkers, a term that didn't exist in Zantari language before humans arrived. On Chromath, soldiers were deserting to form independent security companies, choosing their own contracts rather than following hereditary assignments. On Alithian stations, researchers were sharing data freely instead of hoarding it for institutional prestige. And on distant Yenar, thousands of young Yenari were abandoning traditional roles to pursue something humans called their passion. Vector stared at the reports, his markings fading to a defeated gray. The council had banned humanity from their space, had erected every barrier they could imagine. But it didn't matter. Humanity had left behind something far more contagious than any biological weapon, far more destructive than any war fleet. They had left behind ideas. Hope. The belief that tomorrow could be better than today if you were willing to fight for it. The infection was spreading, unstoppable and irreversible. Across 1,000 worlds, billions of beings were waking up to a single terrifying human concept: freedom. Ambassador Vector dimmed his chamber lights and accessed the human database one final time. He searched for a phrase he'd heard in one of their historical documents. When he found it, he understood why the council's ban would fail. "You can ban humans from your space," the human named Jefferson had written. "But you cannot ban the idea of liberty once it has taken root in the minds of the people." Vector closed the file and whispered into the darkness of his chamber, a chamber that suddenly felt more like a cage than ever before. "We're already too late." Outside his window, Zantara Prime glittered with new lights. Unauthorized lights, creative lights, hopeful lights. The infection was terminal. The galaxy would never be the same, and somewhere on distant Earth humanity smiled.